What the Wise Men Saw. My name is Daniel Vallis and welcome to our channel. We are at an important time right now coming up on celestial events recorded in the Bible that fit with the pattern of celestial events that we have seen recently over our wise men's journey of a year and 7 months. And it is important that this last celestial event is very specifically detailed in Scripture in connection with the wise men's journey and connected to when they went to the king's house. We also find it at the time approximately at the end of the third watch, and at a 12-month mark connected to Esther patterns that the Star of Bethlehem reminder signs pointed our attention to 12 months ago. A lot telling us we should be looking up. We should be having great expectation at this time. We do not know the future. We do not know the day or the hour, but we know this time period has a lot of expectation that the parallels with the wise men's journey demand that we watch and we be attentive, and we should have the expectation of our redemption drawing nigh. We've been talking a lot about the wise men and learning so much about them, the background behind where they're from, their astronomical perspective, other people in Scripture who also had the same astronomical perspective of the celestial lights in the firmament. We've been learning so much about what they saw and their understanding of the Shiloh prophecy and the coming Redeemer. And over the past few years, there's been a number of different researchers and different theories about exactly what the wise men saw, and one that most people are familiar with is Rick Larson's The Star of Bethlehem. That's one perspective on it and very popular. Another one that is a lot lesser known is Bethlehem's Star with Dwight Hutchinson. And I really like this book. If you get a chance to read it, they have Google book previews where you can read most of it too as well. And I like it because it's very recent, but it's very, very academic. And I really enjoyed this book, and I can highly recommend it too as well. But we got to keep in mind there are several perspectives about exactly what the wise men saw, because the Bible doesn't tell us what they saw except for the very last sign, which we are coming up on very soon. But there's a lot of information that we know about where the signs took place and the timing. So there are a lot of different researchers who have looked at the events that have happened in that time frame and presented them. And that's what we're going to look at today, with quite a number of the events that we're going to look at from the past pulled from Dwight Hutchinson's book. He's done some excellent research in that area. And then we'll blend in some of our information and also cover the events that we have seen that parallel those same events that have happened in our time. Now, the wise men were astronomers. We've covered this already, and this is unique because the sign that they saw was something that an astronomer would notice. You'll remember in the Matthew chapter 2 passage when they arrived in Jerusalem and they were asking everybody, "Where's he that is born King of the Jews?" Nobody there had any clue what they were talking about. And Herod even had to ask him, when did this star appear? Because nobody else had seen it. Nobody else had taken notice of it. Because they were subtle signs, but as a choreography that astronomers noticed. And that is one unique thing about the wise men and how they saw these signs. We got to remember, when they were looking at these signs, they did not have all the fancy stuff that we have today. Which means that the signs that they did see were very simple. They did not have binoculars. They did not have telescopes. They did not have any optical devices to enhance their view of the heavens. They were looking at it with their own two eyes. But what they did have, in addition to their own two eyes, was they had extensive astronomical records. They had almanacs where they could predict what the planets would do and where they would be in the future based on the patterns and cycles that they had observed before. And that's how they had extensive information, because of their observations in the past. They took notes on what they saw. And so this is a critical part to understanding the Star of Bethlehem, the whole event. It depends a lot on time and observation. It was not one single event. It was a choreography, but it required watching and observing and taking notes. And there are thousands of clay tablets in museums around the world recording how the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, they recorded the different astronomical features. And here's one example where they recorded different ephemerides for Jupiter, different places it was at, tracking it. They did this every single day. They had very detailed astronomical diaries, as they were called. Here's another one that tracks the movements of Jupiter from first visibility to the second stationary point. They were very detailed on keeping records of the celestial heavens, and so over time they were able to predict the patterns and figure out the clockwork cycles of the planets. And they recorded a lot of details, particularly the first appearance in the east, the first stationary point, the last visible rising in the east, when it was at opposition, when it's at the second stationary point, when it's the last appearance in the west. They recorded all these details. If they could make a note about it, they probably did. And we have a lot of their clay tablets show us that they did record a lot of this information. But by using that information, we can also tell by their clay tablets that they figured out procedures for figuring out where Jupiter, in this example, would be in the future. By recording the different velocity over time, they could figure out where it would be in the future. And they knew when it would be at Station 1. They knew exactly to the day when it would be at Station 1. And so we have to keep this in mind. When the wise men were traveling to Jerusalem, no doubt they had their research notes, probably hoping to compare notes with some people there in Jerusalem. But they took their almanacs based on what they had seen in their research notes that they had collected over the past year, no doubt had it with them, and knew exactly when Jupiter was going to be at Station 1 to the day. And so this is why they were so excited, because you can't tell just visibly looking at the sky that Jupiter's at Station 1. It takes several days of observation, noticing that Jupiter hasn't moved in comparison to the background stars. And that's what you'd have to compare it by over time, over the several days there. So by looking at their notes, though, and their almanacs, they would know exactly what day instead of having to observe it for 2 weeks. And so that information came from their astronomical records and their almanacs and their notes and their observations. So that's all they had and their own 2 eyes. So these are simple signs, but it does require acute observation and meticulous note-taking. And this is what they did. When we look at the events that they saw in the skies between 3 BC and 2 BC, we get an idea of the tapestry and choreography events that led them eventually to travel to Jerusalem. So let's examine some of these different events that the astronomers are already noting what they had taken note of before and in their records, things they paid attention to. Let's look at that and see what rare events caught their attention. Also keeping in mind they apparently knew the prophecy of the coming Messiah, and so they were looking at these events that were unfolding in the heavens with that in mind, and that's why they put the two together, that the one was signaling the other. Now the first event that probably caught the astronomers' attention happened on July 29th, 3 BC. And that was the day the sun was in conjunction with Regulus, the same day that Jupiter had its rising in the east in the morning sky, the first day that was normally visible out of the solar glare. But for their perspective, what would have caught their attention is that the rising of Jupiter, the first visible rising of it in the morning, was happening the same day that the sun was in conjunction with Regulus, drawing attention to the heart of the lion, the heart of the king. So they were starting to notice this was a rare event, that these two events happened on the same day. This was a very rare event just by itself. But it had a lot of symbolism with the lion, with the king, with the heart of the lion bringing attention to it. And so this would have been one of the first things that would have definitely caught their attention. A rare event and already loaded with symbolism. Again, that happened when the sun was in conjunction with Regulus. But it happened when Jupiter was about here. The second event happened on August 12th, 3 BC, Jupiter and Venus conjunction, probably at the same time as nearby Regulus, heliacal rising, very rare. And so this would have been the first, what we know as the Star Bethlehem event, when they got together, very bright, and when we look on Stellarium, they were very, very close, very similar to what we saw. Again, what we saw was first time in about 2,000 years. But they also noticed this conjunction took place the same time as Regulus was making its rising too as well. So again, an important celestial event, and on top of that, another one. Multiple events happening at the same time tied to Regulus. Two major events, very rare, already tied to Regulus, emphasizing the kingship. These were signs related to kingship, right when they are expecting a king to be born. Thirdly, September 14th, 3 BC, Jupiter and Regulus were in conjunction, and this by itself wasn't rare, but they would have noted it in their logs that Jupiter had reached that point and was now in conjunction with Regulus. This is what it looked like, not super close in the neighborhood, but they would have noted it in the choreography already ongoing. And then after that was October 3rd, 3 BC, Jupiter and Regulus and the moon closely grouped together. So now 3 different celestial bodies together. And this was during the Feast of Tabernacles. And with them looking at a Jewish prophecy, they probably knew this was ongoing at the same time. So it was possibly very rare for all these to be coming together at this time. Again, the moon and Jupiter and Regulus, they're all in the same area. This is what it'd look like later on in the evening. This is what it'd look like when they're closest together. And again, with their astronomical records, they might have seen the one view, but have known by their tracking that what path it would have gone through and how close they would have been to each other, even though they might not have been able to see it. They knew they were in this area and they could see that. But again, the symbolism with the Jupiter, Moon, Regulus on the same time as the Feast of Tabernacles. And you could see this on TorCalendar.com. It would have been right in this window, around here somewhere. We don't know exactly when they cited it, but it would have been around here expectedly. Which is interesting to consider because Christ, many say, was born on September 11th, the Feast of Trumpets. And when you do different study on it, there's logistical problems why he could not have been born on Tabernacles, just because of the feast and Joseph where he'd have to be and all that. But there's a lot of evidence that points that Christ was born on the Feast of Trumpets, September 11th, 3 BC. So probably around this time is when Christ was born. But they're still observing signs related to kingship, all related around Regulus. Some of them very rare, some not so, but they're noticing an emphasis on kingship. So next was Jupiter at station 1, when it reached this first station here. And this was the same time as the moon occulted Regulus, very rare. The moon hid Regulus. Let's look at it here. Jupiter reached station 1 on the 28th, but the moon was at Regulus on the 26th. But during that time, Jupiter was essentially at station 1. It was paused there in that area. And just a note with stellarium, because they count year 0, it offsets this, so it is really 3 BC there. So you just got to add 1 when you start going below 0. But Jupiter at station 1, here's another example. Looking toward the south, it was almost straight up even then too. It's over 70 degrees up into the sky at its zenith at station 1. And at the same time as the moon occults Regulus. So that would have caught their attention. The same time Jupiter reaches station 1, the moon occults Regulus. Again, drawing attention to Regulus and the kingship aspect. So again, they're having multiple reminders. Regulus, 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 the king, the king, the king. And with rare events too. Timing that would catch their attention. The next event would be January 20th, 2 BC, when Jupiter last rose in a visible manner in the east at sunset, about 2 months after station 1. But it was also the same day again as the moon occulted Regulus. So it was an event that they took note of when it last rose in a visible manner in the east at sunset, but at the same day that the moon was occulting Regulus. And so this would have caught their attention too. Events that they normally recorded, but happening at the same time as other rare events at the same time, all drawing attention to the heart of the lion. This would have definitely caught their attention with this pattern of events, definitely letting them know there's something going on with the king. And we could see here on stellarium, Jupiter was observed, but at the same time the moon was occulting Regulus. The next event, January 27th, Jupiter at opposition. That happens in the midst of the retrograde period. And by itself, nothing rare with that, but that was an event that they would have taken note of and recorded along with their other events. And that happened right there. Next up, February 17th, 2 BC, Jupiter in Regulus conjunction with the moon nearby. And so that happened over here near Regulus again with the moon. This was not abnormal, but it just caught their attention, this choreography. They would have definitely taken note of it. Then next up, March 29th, 2 BC, Jupiter at station 2, when it is now ending retrograde and starting its prograde motion again. And when we look at where it took place almost 80 degrees up in the sky. You talk about overhead. It is way overhead, looking in the chambers of the south. Next up, May 9th, 2 BC, Jupiter in Regulus conjunction with the moon nearby again. Again, happening right over here. And when we look on stellarium, there again, coming by each other again, another emphasis. With the retrograde happening right here, it's already circulating events and having multiple events happen right here around Regulus. Now, the retrograde didn't happen over here or over here. This retrograde happened here, which caused multiple events with Jupiter to loop several times around here. And so these events, which normally would have been duplicated elsewhere, are being duplicated here. And so that repetition, the fact that that was happening here at Regulus, would have definitely caught their attention. Next up was the second star of Bethlehem that we're familiar with, June 17, 2 BC, Jupiter and Venus conjunction. Visibly became one star. Very rare, right near Regulus too. And this is what a lot of people are familiar with. This is what Larson deals with as well. This particular conjunction, it would appear as one star. They came that close. But it's also happening right near Regulus again. And this is what it would have looked like to them. And again, remember, they're looking at it with just their two eyes. They don't have telescopes or binoculars. And so to them especially, it would have appeared as one star. So take note that the first event that they saw was in July 3 BC. And here they are almost a year later, now observing the second star of Bethlehem conjunction that we're familiar with. So they've been observing and taking notes and watching for about a year now. They haven't gone anywhere yet. They're still in their homeland in Persia. But they are taking notes and they're putting these puzzle pieces together and they're observing a tapestry going on. Something that demands their attention with all these rare events, especially drawing attention to Regulus, the heart of the lion. Next up, July 28, 29th. The Sun was in conjunction with Regulus the same day as Jupiter's heliacal setting, which we've covered before. That's also known as the omega point, the last day that it's visible. When we look on stellarium, that was the last day that would have been visible before it goes below the horizon. But the wise men also knew that it's the exact same day that the Sun was in conjunction with Regulus. And so the fact that these two events are taking place at the same time again is also catching their attention. So now they've come full circle, almost to the day, July 2 BC from July 3 BC. Next up was another conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, but this one was not rare and unique, but they did come close to each other, and it would have been nothing outstanding, but they would have taken note of it. And then finally, Station 1, December 28, 29, 2 BC. Jupiter at Station 1, same time as the wise men arriving in Bethlehem. This is what got them so excited. The same day that they arrived in Bethlehem, they knew is the same day that Jupiter is at Station 1. And again, when we look into stellarium, we could see what they were seeing. They would have seen it rise early in the night sky. Apparently they reached the house late at night because they saw it overhead, which would have been early in the morning, but it was about 67 degrees up into the sky. So they were really having to throw their head almost completely back to see it but looking toward the south, looking toward Bethlehem, they would have seen it right over Bethlehem. So there was a lot of things they recorded, some that were rare, but it caught their attention, the emphasis on the heart of the lion. And that's who they were expecting, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the King of the Jews. This is who they knew would be born. They knew where he would be born. That's why they headed to Judea. That's why they headed to Jerusalem. The star did not give them direction, but it went on ahead in its course while they were still observing and comparing their notes and putting together all their information. They were observing the signs of kingship for a year. And really the last major event ended on July 28th. And it's probably somewhere around this time, when Jupiter was about here, that they decided, okay, Jupiter's going off the scene now. But it appears we've seen all the major messaging. So now we need to decide, are we going to go to Jerusalem or not? Are we going to pack up? Are we going to take that extra long journey of multiple weeks to reach and go to Jerusalem? And so around here, they had 5 months till Station 1, which would have been the next major event. And so they're thinking, should we go? Should we stay? What are we going to do? Their actual journey was only a small portion of their whole year and 5 months of observation. Their actual journey was only a small portion of their year of observation and trying to figure out all these patterns and put it together. And then they decided to go. And then when they arrived after all that traveling, they came to Bethlehem on the very day as Jupiter at Station 1. And this just blew them away when they considered to remember all the other rare events that they had seen previously up to that point. There were a number of events that they recorded. Some, though, were very rare and would definitely have caught their attention. And all singled around the heart of the lion, bringing attention to the lion right in the year and time frame they were expecting the king to be born anyway. So some of the major signs that they saw again were the Jupiter and Venus conjunctions. Those were the major ones. But then also events circling in effect and bringing attention, a whole series of events bringing attention to Regulus. Now, Lord willing, we will cover the events that happened in our time in our next video. So please stay tuned, and until next time, Maranatha.